Okay, so today this is interesting because I've not done this as a sort of double-hander type podcast. So I've got Pip Waller and Lucy Wells. The traditional first question that I normally do is, what do you do? So you can find it out amongst the two of you which one wants to go first.
Pip, what do you do?
Well, I do things to do with, mostly I do things to do with plants and herbal medicine. You could say plant medicine.
Right.
So I started as a medical herbalist. I was 19 when I started going to the herbal school, and I qualified. I was coming up to 23, and I've been in practice ever since. And then
that's just a couple of years then.
Just a couple of years, yeah.
21.
And then 15 years ago, I trained with Elliot Cowan, or 17 years actually ago. I trained with Elliot Cowan, and that's where I met Lucy. And we trained as plant spirit medicine healers. And then so all that time then I've been using the plant spirit medicine healing in my practice as well as herbs. In fact, mostly it's plant spirit medicine now with herbs on the side. And then I'm also a writer, so I've written quite a few books, all non-fiction books about natural medicine. And cool. One of them being this one, which is a book of stories.
Right, Touched by Nature, yeah.
Yeah. And I wrote that with my very dear friend and esteemed colleague, Lucy Wells.
Right, Lucy, it's your go now.
Yeah, what do I do? It's quite hard to say, really.
I know, that's why I ask it.
Yeah, what an
It's a trick question.
So I came to the plant spirit medicine via a lifelong interest in Qi energy, and I was a Tai Chi, well, still am a Tai Chi practitioner, and had done quite a lot of study with different Qigong masters and that kind of thing. And so I wasn't really expecting to be kind of called to work with plants, and but through a series of events which are all kind of in the stories in the book, the book fell into my pathway and I was just hooked, and so that's where I met Pip. I also do performance and kind of community arts sort of things, and I'm really, really interested in energy. So I'm also really interested in kind of unified physics and how energy works. So, actually how the energy of the plant spirits affects our human systems is completely fascinating. So that's the angle that I come in from, and I really enjoy writing. So when Pip and I decided to collaborate, it was a piece of fun and pleasure, as well as wanting to get the word out, really, because it's not a hugely known modality.
No, that's right. You know that obviously I interviewed Anne Lynn a little while ago.
Yeah.
So, obviously there's quite a few different diverse podcasts, because it's loosely about creativity. That's why it's called creative, but it's from any angle. And obviously, I'm a musician, but so one sort of thread of that is the musical perspective. And I've always been fascinated by the fact, like you're talking about, energy, that there is obviously something going on within music, which you can sort of, musicians talk about it, about being in the zone or being in the groove or whatever. And it's a very similar thing. It's like it's this sort of indefinable thing that seems to permeate stuff. So when you're talking about plant spirit medicine, I can sort of get that from that perspective, where there's something else.
I'd really like to put you on then to a book that I'm just reading, which you might already be on to. It's called Cosmometry.
No, I haven't heard it.
A guy called Marshall Lefferts, American, who's writing about the nature of reality from the perspective of unified physics, music, and what was the third? Like wholeness. I mean, it's all holistic. And he says exactly that about music being, compressed sound waves, which it's not so different from what we're doing when we're harnessing the energy. So I think it's obviously at this point in time in history, these things are now becoming much sharper into focus, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, this was a theory that musicians had centuries ago. I mean, there's a whole idea of music of the spheres.
It's not anything new, is it?
No, it's not new at all. It's just gone. It's gone out of fashion, basically. I mean, certainly Bach was writing pieces of music with that concept that it was about the music of the cosmos.
I want to put you on to Gemma as well, a colleague and friend of ours who's a plant spirit medicine healer, and she's a musician, a singer, and she's got some songs, beautiful songs that come from the plants.
Right.
So you'll have to have her another day. I'm going to introduce
Well, I've always been intrigued by, and in fact, I've got a little charity called Icaro, which is about, enabling kids to just write songs without it being evaluated or whatever. And obviously it comes from the term, from the Icaros. So this idea that music comes from everywhere. It's not just from us, obviously. It comes from the opposite birds and things.
Me and Lucy, one of the things we do, Vic, is we teach weekend introductions to connecting very directly with plants and therefore with nature and ourselves and each other. And one particular, often people have where the plants play the music or sing to them, but there was one particular weekend we did where everybody had something very musical. And like one guy wrote a whole song, but he was a musician, so that was his thing. And he wrote a whole song that was from the dock, like the dock leaf that he was sat with. And everyone had a different song. So we the whole weekend had a soundtrack. It was amazing. So the plants,
So let's get back to the sort of I was going to say the roots of this. I suppose that's that.
The branches or the flowers or the
So how did you start off, Pip? What was the first thing when you realised that you had a particular sort of trajectory, put it that way?
Oh, good question. Well, actually, I think it was when I was a little girl, and I was quite lucky. I grew up in Devon, and back in the day, you could go out on your own when you were a kid and play. And I used to go to the woods, and I can still remember actually like some of my favourite plants, or the first plants that I was friends with, and it was red campion and primroses are the ones I particularly remember, but also the crabapple tree that was in the garden, and basically I think the plants got me then, but actually I didn't really. Then I also had this fascination with medicine. I mean, it must be whatever past lives means or ancestry. It must be that, because really when I was 4 or 5, I was already saying, I'm going to, when I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to give people medicine and make them better. That was my thing. And then I used to make airfix models of the human body. I was probably an anatomy geek, actually, when I was 8 or 9. I was fascinated by medicine. But then I'm also really, I'm not very, in one way I'm interested in science, but I'm not, there's a dryness to the conventional science that never grabbed me. So basically when I hit my teenage years and I was like very creative and a bit wild, And then I wasn't interested in physics and chemistry as taught in school. So I only had biology, and that's the end of medicine then, if you think you're going one way, and then that's the end of it. And then so I didn't really know what I was going to do. And my mum and dad both went to herbalists for some fairly serious health issues in there when I was a teenager, and had a huge amount of help. They went to a wonderful herbalist in Mansfield in Nottinghamshire. And so they were so keen to get me to do something, because they hated the idea that I didn't know what I was going to do. You've got to know what you're going to do. Yeah. And so they kind of more or less got the application form, said, why don't you be a herbalist? You know, it's alternative, which I was into alternative stuff. And but it's medicine, you know. So I was like, oh, all right then. And I applied to get a job at uni. I lived in Shepherd's Bush at the time. And I also applied to get a job at Unigate Dairy as a milkwoman. And I got both. I got the job as a milkwoman, and I got the herbal medicine. I thought, oh, okay, I'll do the herbal medicine. That was when I was 18, 19. So yeah, that was it really. And then it's only over the years that I've realized, oh, wow, you know, I think the plants pulled me, you know, I think I was guided by life to do the thing that I'm supposed to be doing rather than, and it's been quite a journey to where I am now, which is really where I can feel all the strands interweaving of the different passions that I've had, you know.
Yeah.
And but my main work that I do is seeing people come to me that need help. That's my main.
That's great. Lucy, your turn.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say there's a couple of things really. I think actually, I think I'm going to say it was damage.
Right.
It was feeling damaged.
Yeah.
That started kind of an inquiry into, is this really it? You know, growing up in the 1970s and all the kind of, just all the dark stuff, and experiencing some of that and searching, so not knowing and feeling, you know, kind of this very deep sorrow, I suppose, and lostness that led me to take up Tai Chi. And then I thought I was going to go to acupuncture. And so that was my trajectory. And then being involved in, you know, kind of, I suppose, sort of alternative culture and not doing the expected paths. Then I worked as a doctor's receptionist and saw a lot of the corruption in the health service and the lack of care.
Yep.
And also, you know, being quite lost, not really knowing, and kind of making things and being as creative as possible within this sort of background of something not right. And then, you know, like Pip was saying, the sense that life leads you to where you need to go. So kind of a gradually unfolding of a deeper energetic process that actually has got your back. So the dawning realization that there is a bigger and more meaningful something, you know, in the patterns of the way things play out. So that's how plant spirit medicine came in, and then a move into living rurally rather than urban, and the incredible relief that's affordable there. I moved from London to North Devon, and you know, at that point I didn't know anything about it, and not so long ago, on a return to those hedgerows, having learnt about making connection, actual kind of friendships with these plant beings, realizing, wow, you know, I walked through this lane with hedges and my heart kind of exploded with the realization of, you know, honeysuckle and thorn and blackberry and nettle and dandelion and all these friends from that kind of very lonely, damaged place.
Yeah.
Isolated place, if I'm honest, of course, when you're in it, you're just being,
that's right.
You're living your life, aren't you? But when you really open up to the truth of actually how unhappy deeply you might be feeling, or I was feeling. So I think that's the truthful answer.
So interesting, because it was, when did you learn Tai Chi then? Was it?
I learned in Brixton in the days where you could, if you were signed on, you could have in the local authority thing, you could do as many classes as you want for £1. And I went to this Tai Chi class, and my original teacher was a guy called Adrian Murray. And I just loved it. Again, I thought my body knew something about moving in this way. And I kind of got in touch with how wired I was. And that deep relaxation, where you open to an energy flow. It was kind of a proper wake up, very definitely knew from the first class.
Yeah.
So because of that system, I was able to go to a lot of classes and repeat them and really get a grounding. And so it wasn't so long before then I started teaching myself. Teaching classes as and. So.
Yeah. So there's a few little threads there. I mean, talking about the amount of people who know what they're going to be doing by the time they're at least 5 or 8. It's quite a common theme.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a lot of environmental things that sort of kick in as well. I mean, I grew up in Cornwall, so.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. So it was.
Whereabouts?
I was in North Cornwall, so Wadebridge, Ecclesale,
right.
Actually. And my sister and brother still live down there. But then I moved back up to Kent, because I was born in Kent, but we moved down before I could walk. But then I moved back up again when I was a teenager. So that was a real shock. Back to Dartford, above all places. But the interesting thing was that when you grow up in a, as you say, you're outside most of the time. It's a completely different. You grow up in a completely different way, I think. And then obviously by, what you're saying, Lucy, connecting to things and then moving to somewhere like, moving to Devon later on, you get that sort of thing that you're already sensitized to something, and then you get it all.
Yeah.
all in one go. But growing up in it is a sort of an interesting thing, because it's you're aware that you're not the only thing there, if you sort of mean, when you're growing up. Strange encounters with unusual animals and things, like kingfishers, and I can remember all this sort of stuff. I had a very weird encounter with a rat once, which was bizarre in reflection.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't sort of get that. And now, nowadays, I'm thinking for a lot of kids, I don't know, strange that you're so informed, aren't you, by nature when you're young, if you grow up in it.
Absolutely.
Because you're open to it,
Yeah.
And I think that, that's on an energetic level as well as it just being an experiential thing. But yeah.
I think now it's a problem, because even people that live in the country often are growing up in front of a screen.
Yes.
And when I was young, even if you lived in a town or a city, you were outside a lot.
Yeah.
So you still, even if there's not loads of plants, there's the wind and the rain and the air and the outside world. It's a problem of being indoors a lot, I think.
Well, it is, and having that sort of your focus is always just I mean, there's a lot of kids when I was growing up who just spent a lot of time watching the telly. So I think actually that it's been a problem for quite some time. But yeah, interesting. So with the Tai Chi thing, because you were saying about Brixton, when I lived in Dartford, I wanted to learn Tai Chi and I couldn't find anyone. And the nearest place I could find was in Brixton.
Hey,
weirdly, but
sure we weren't in the same class.
no, I didn't actually learn that, but I actually ended up learning Aikido.
Aha, right.
Which they did in Dartford. They had a really good teacher there. So that was brilliant. And I think, again, that's another little thread that's an important thing. It's just that learning how you connect up energetically.
Absolutely.
So with your different paths, and let's sort of weave our way around this. So with the herbalism then, Pip, did you sort of take to that straight away, or were there elements of it that were a bit, where you had to, you seemed, because I know you've produced a lot of books. We've got your anatomy book here in the house.
Well, it's funny your question, about like where does things start and that, because when I was a little girl, as well as liking plants and liking like medicine, or being fascinated with how things work, and actually I love what Lucy said, and I had the same thing of like things are broken and I want to be part of fixing them, basically. But I don't know if I would have been able to say it then, but definitely that was in there, like let's make things better. But I also wrote a lot. I wrote all the time. I mean, I was an avid reader and writer from when I was tiny, really. And so I when I think about, I used to write stories and poems, but I also used to write like textbooks about, I don't know, things I was interested in, like horses, or like my beloved mum, rest in peace, Sheila, she kept all my, she kept all my early efforts. So I saw them recently, when I was having a clear out recently. I thought, oh, so yeah. I can't remember what you asked. Yeah, aspects. So I loved like herbal medicine. I think the thing for me is I was so fucked up when I was, a teenager. I was really messed up. I'm adopted, and I had a pretty mangled early start that nobody really understood about. So, I was on my own with it, really. So I was so messed up as a teenager. And I think the biggest problem, because I was very young when I did the herbal medicine course, nearly everyone else was quite a bit older, and it was a second career. I think there was one other young woman in the class, and all the rest were, one person was in there, like, I think early 60s even.
All right.
People were in their late 20s, 30s, 40s. It was like, they'd already had a bit of life. So I was very well aware that I didn't know anything. I knew things about herbs, but I didn't really know anything about life. And I was younger than most of my clients, unless they were kids, And there you are giving people advice. So that's the bit that was difficult. It's like, how do you, And for me, it was the thing with the medical herbal. I did Western, herbal medicine, which is it's fascinating. And it's very sciencey. And then you learn about herbs and active constituents and stuff, which are interesting, but it never really grabbed me. But what I wanted to know is how to heal the soul. And I wouldn't have been able to say that because I didn't even know those words, but I knew that I needed something really deeply touching that was going to take more than, knowing that the active constituents of a plant. But I must have known, and I didn't know this consciously, but I must also have known that plants and nature has got something that can touch those places. So that's it, really.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Lucy, do you want to say anything before I jump in?
What's going through my mind is I had quite a strict religious beginning, being raised in a large Catholic family and a lot of indoctrination and a lot of terror. I used to have a lot of nightmares about church and some real life nightmares to do with some of the people that worked in those places. And so when that all bust apart in my early teens, that kind of catalyzed this kind of lost feeling. But then reconnecting with energy or spirit, let's move into that world. Like Pip was saying, there's this kind of like a calling to do healing, to make things better at this very fundamental level. When you see the kind of hypocrisy and you see the nasty stuff, or you experience that, there's this, it's kind of is really a passion to get to something true and essential about what's going on. So I think energy work or spiritual work, there's something really clean about it. There's something that you know is a relief. And I think that as a sort of guide, then realizing that that nature itself and the plants are offering that help, it's such a significant relief. It's such a kind of uplift. And when we do the plant spirit medicine, when we learn about how to make these connections, and we dream with the plants and we journey with them. And I mean, personally, I experienced just these incredible reliefs, ongoing relief and release and light, I'm going to say, really light, clean, pure energy that cleans out that corruption and that rottenness and that damage that culturally so many of us experience. But that's the power, and that's the kind of place where you get drawn and along, and then once you find it, you can't give it up. And it might manifest in lots of different ways, like you're saying in music. There's something in hearing or playing or singing that is just divine.
So it's an interesting thing that I think, Pip, you were talking about the sort of the scientific aspect of medicine. And what sort of sprung to mind, it's like the problem with science, it's like how things work with the soul taken out. Yeah. If you see what I mean. Because and unfortunately music's arrived at that when you see it taught often, unfortunately.
I feel like I want to jump in and defend, because I'm following some really shit hot, wonderful scientists, and it's brought out the scientist in me.
No, I'm not saying these people aren't there that are connected up, but I mean generally when you see how it's done,
yeah,
there are certain areas that scientists can't. I mean, there's a couple that will go there, but most of them won't, because from a professional point of view, they can't start going down the route of.
They get destroyed if they go down.
Exactly.
If they go down a route doesn't fit the mainstream.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like they've got to tick all the boxes, and this is also true
of doctors, isn't it? As well.
Well, it is. Of course, it is.
Stand out against the narrative.
Exactly. Yeah, but of course, it's so entrenched, because it's, in a way, it's a form of heresy if you saying things that aren't on the, part of the doctrine, if you like. And I know that this is it's true in all sorts of areas. This.
Yeah. And isn't there a strong resonance that heresy is still kind of alive and kicking in our culture.
Well, we haven't
To burn people's
really.
estates.
Yeah, we haven't sort of given up religion. We just call it science now, it seems.
Exactly.
I mean, it's possible that we're more religious in that respect now than we ever have been. If you see what I mean, because everybody's sticking to the, you know, the hymn sheet, if you like. But I was going to say something that you've mentioned, Pip. You know, if you went back far enough into use of herbs, it would have all been connected up from that sort of soul thing.
Absolutely. And actually, the thing that happened in European, but especially very strongly in England, there are some countries in Europe that retained their traditions more than we did, but very strongly here, and this ties in with what Lucy was saying as well, is the suppression of the old religions and the old understanding of energetics, and not just that, but the using of Christianity and the church as an agent of oppression and control, which then led to the what were called the witch hunts and etc. Basically, hundreds and hundreds of years of horrendous oppression and torture and murdering people who had any kind of knowledge and any kind of herbal knowledge, but also just were lonely old people very often that didn't really have any friends or anyone that was a bit unusual. There were lots of things. It's a very shameful part of our history. And what it meant in the UK created an enormous fear of herbal medicine, an enormous fear of doing things that are different, that make you stand out in any way, that go against the mainstream narrative. And the herbal medicine had almost, like, I'm going to say almost died out, and there are little pockets here and there. Some families retained like the old knowledge and the as a what's the word, a lineage. But then what happened actually with herbal medicine, it's quite, in the UK, it's quite an interesting journey that it had, because actually some people, people went to America when it was being discovered, or basically, you know, conquered and overrun. And some of those people noticed, that the Pilgrim Fathers noticed, and the native people of America were incredibly healthy, really, 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 really healthy compared to our, you know, you can imagine the 16th century, 17th century English people that went over were not in great shape. Medicine was in very poor shape then. And they had, the Native Americans had an amazing knowledge of herbs. So there was a couple of key people that learned herbal medicine. I think one of them he was lame, so he couldn't do a lot of farm work. So he ended up, learning about plants, and he amalgamated. And then it was what came back to the UK was an amalgamation of the European tradition, which also by then had Egyptian and knowledge and Greek and all from all over Europe melded in, and the Native American knowledge. And then it came to prominence in the Industrial Revolution, because you had big towns in the north of England, big towns with huge populations that had sprung up around the mills and the factories and so on. And people didn't have, there wasn't enough doctors. And also at that time, the doctors were all basically upper class. They were like younger sons of aristocrats that had spent 15 years learning Latin and Greek at university, and then whatever passed as medicine in those days, which was really appalling. So I'm not saying any of them would that probably some of them were good, because they would have been intelligent people that had tried to learn more, but really it was a shambles. They were giving people, they had a handful of medicines. They were giving people poisons. It was a total shambles. And so these herbalists, it came to prominence. The herbalists also, I like herbal medicine of all the alternative things, because it's always been the poor person's medicine. And it's not really had the expensive, like homeopathy. You had royal, I love homeopathy as well, so I'm not slagging it, right, but it had royal patronage and so on. Herbal medicine was very straightforward, and it was things you could go and pick and so on, so it was a poor person's medicine. So there were herbalists that made an absolute name for themselves, basically saved people's lives in those big cholera epidemics and typhoid epidemics of the early 1800s, 1830s. And where if you went to, back in those days, it was known that if you went to the doctor, the chances are the doctor would kill you.
Yeah.
So, but the herbalist saved people. So that's the roots, and that was the roots of the kind of modern herbal medicine came from, sort of staggered along from then, you know, people learning it. And the National Institute of Medical Herbalists, established in 1864, trained people. And then in the last, well, it was over 30 years ago that I was 35 years ago, I was at college, and it was the beginning of the time when lots of research was being done. Sadly, a lot of animal experiments as well, actually. I say sadly because I don't agree with them. But lots of research, modern scientific research, showing active constituents of plants and how they're pharmacologically active in the body. So, and that's a very long answer, but I don't know if it was.
No, it's good. That's great. So getting back to the energy bit then.
Yeah.
Maybe Lucy, you could say something about this, because I always, you know, I like, well, from my own perspective, I've always come into things from like a left field, right? So I sort of got involved in music through arts, really, and not through learning something when I was 6 or something like that. I suddenly decided I wanted to do something, but because I had an artistic bent, I sort of viewed music like that. So Lucy, this is interesting because you're coming into a healing modality, let's put it loosely like that, from a completely different place other than, you know, how could we put it, from sort of herbalism, not from herbalism, we're coming in from like energetic.
Yeah, that's right.
So how does that, what's your experience of that? Because that must be like, suddenly this is a whole new thing, explodes on the scene, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. I think you're a really good interviewer.
Oh, thank you. Flattery gets you everywhere.
Oh no, sorry, I didn't mean.
No, I'm only joking.
It was a genuine thing, because I think you're touching on. So the experience for me was of a lot of doubt. So not having a kind of pharmacological understanding, you know, I've had to and having my Catholic heritage, I've had to really, really grapple with doubt. Like, how can this be real? You know, it's quite far out. Plant spirit medicine is quite a far out concept. You know, that the energy of all these plant beings around us are actually offering to help us. You know, I've got friends and family members who'd say, well, look, I can go along with it so far because I like going for a walk in the woods and I know that does me good. But, you know, how can you make that claim that these plant spirits are wanting to get involved in our healing? That seems a bit of a leap. But from an energetic perspective, if we do think of ourselves as fundamentally, you know, kind of wave and particles cohesed into form, and that actually it's the energy that's running through us that's more interesting, or that's fundamentally and the essence, then why wouldn't it be so? Because
exactly.
You can see from the, you know, if you take a little tiny seed, I mean, if you take a kind of tiny seed and then look at that, it's like, why would you doubt what, that kind of just puts doubt on its back. So I don't know if I've coherently answered all.
No, I get what you're saying. I mean,
yeah,
I think the problem is you're saying about your sort of the Catholicism indoctrination, but it's sort of baked in to our society anyway. Like,
yeah, I don't
everything
think
has to
it's
be qualified in order to do
Yeah.
whatever. But of course, before you go to school, the things that you've learnt are phenomenal. You've learnt to speak and communicate, and all the incredible abilities that a little kid has got physically is astonishing. And then they go to school, and it's like, to learn, you think, well, they've done pretty well up to now.
Yes, and often they go to school and they're taught that they're stupid.
And I think the problem is, if we realise that a lot of those things is about conforming, it's not actually about learning.
Yeah.
And then when you look at that, and you think, well, actually, we know this, most systems are a community. You look at an oak tree, and most of the oak tree isn't an oak tree, it's everything that's living on it. And same with the human body. There's more stuff in it than is us. You think from that point of view, well, okay, so what are all these plants communicating? Well, they're probably communicating with a lot of stuff that we wouldn't actually think is us anyway. So once you get into that sort of way of thinking about, patterns of energy and whatever, I think, again, drawing this back to like music, I think it's true with music. It's the music already exists. We just happen to be, it's coming through us. You write a song. Well, you're not writing a song. It's just arriving. You're part of the process. You're part of the alchemy. And then you start. I teach a lot of kids this way, and they learn much faster. It's like there's no pressure. It's like, well, what's going to turn up is what's going to turn up. You just have to be there. Right?
Yeah.
And it's the same with the playing. And I think then you could look at the whole world this way.
Well, we can definitely look on plant spirit medicine that way.
Totally.
Definitely, because actually, what we actually do in terms of when we're with a client or a healee is our part of it is sort of connecting and trying that we've got various things we do where to do what you could call a diagnosis or whatever, what's needed. But at the end of the day, we literally put our hands on a person, or if it's at a distance, have a way of connecting and literally ask the plant, could you give this person your medicine, please?
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, and you have to be out of the way of that. And then the plant shows up. So it's like we have to show up in terms of, trying to do our bit, but actually the plants show up, these awesome beings that come in so many forms that for some reason like us and are happy to help us, even though we're humans don't treat them very well as a species. We're not treating the other species very well.
No, but maybe I think...
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, you could just say, we're conduits, we're agents, we are in service.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is exactly the point I would say about music.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. It's about being skilled enough to be able to let go.
Yeah.
And which again, you think about it, is completely contrary to how we thought for at least 1,000 years.
Yeah.
That unless you're sort of ordained in some shape or form, or you can show your lineage or whatever, that you can take yourself back to St. Peter or whatever, Well, if you think about the thought process, it's not that far removed, is it? From that?
No, that's right.
So I don't know which one of you wants to answer this. What is plant spirit medicine? A definition.
Well, I don't know.
No, This is probably a good thing. It's like when people say to me, "What's musical?"
But what is
I
plants?
don't know.
Okay, do you want to stab at it first?
I'll have a start and then I'll toss.
Go on then.
I'll toss the daisy chain over to you after. So, what do they call it? Elevator pitch definition.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's your unique selling proposition.
Yeah. So it's a healing modality, which has married the way that we do it. It's married the classical Chinese 5-element system of diagnosis and understanding of disease, working out all disease, which has a very deeply spiritual basis, sees us as being spirit, mind, and body, but not a separation between them, but all of those things being expressed in everything about us. And then the energy of the plants, so calling the energy of the plants to come in and correct imbalance, nourish lack, fill, soothe pains, and create balance, bringing the person into balance, so that, and removing energy that shouldn't be in us, energy that's got into us, that's disturbing and cluttering us and polluting us. So removing that and then filling us and nourishing us so that we become more fully ourselves.
Good answer. Do you want to add to that, Lucy? Or
I don't know if I can. That was a great answer, and I think what came up for me during it is that this great mystery of healing, and it's right at the bottom of it, of medicine. So when we say plant spirit medicine, we're talking about healing. We're not talking about taking anything. We're talking about a process of healing. So I'd say that plant spirit medicine is a process of opening up to ourselves as deeply part of nature and not separate from nature. And when we can do that, then we can join with the amazing, beautiful world and universe that we're living in a harmonious way. And healing comes from that mysterious source that's at the source of the universe. So it's a beautiful and ongoing unfolding.
that's nice. There's certainly a thing about resonance and stuff, which I think we often sort of miss, isn't there? I mean, it's like, if you're walking in the woods or somewhere, by the sea or whatever, you can feel that it's doing something positive, which is completely different to sitting in a traffic jam in the middle of a city. And I think for a lot of people, if you said that to them, they go like, yeah, definitely, it's not good to do that, but it's much better to do the former. And you would feel healthier in that thing. So it's not really a big stretch of the imagination to sort of look at this and go, well, if you're in a sort of in a space where you are being nurtured, that it would actually bring a healing of itself. And again, I do a lot of reading. I'm particularly interested in sort of medieval thinking and stuff. And that's not, folklore and stuff is full of stuff like this, where they're very unusual cures that keep cropping up. And they're not just in one place, they're the same one. There'll be one from Devon that's similar to one from Shropshire, and it could be really weird. It could be, shaking some nettles over the top of somebody, that type of thing, whilst reciting a psalm or something. It seems to work because they wouldn't keep doing it, would they? That's the point. People were practical. And I think that's an interesting thing you're saying about the Chinese system. I mean, the Chinese are unbelievably practical people, traditionally. They, very grounded in the fact that they can be very cosmological, but everything is very grounded in China, like Chinese martial arts and stuff. It's unbelievably practical. There's not airy-fairy in it in the slightest.
No.
And again, you know, they wouldn't do that if it didn't work. It's as simple as that.
That's right. The
That's
proof
right.
is in the pudding, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, that's how I've always looked at stuff like this, you know. So when you, you know, again, taking it back from a musical point of view, you know, musical traditions that do stuff, and there's obviously a lot of healing stuff within music, you know, certain types of dances or whatever, or certain types of rhythms played in, you know, samba music is a good example. They have particular rhythms that call in particular spirits. Because people learn samba, they don't think of it that way. But if you went to learn samba properly, it's like, no, you play that drum pattern. You can't change it. It's got to be that one, because that's the call, you know, that's almost like the call sign for whatever spirit that is the spirit of the samba for that particular thing. You can't change it. That's it. And I think we need, because from my point of view, with music, the logical mind is so limited because it's rationing everything, being rational. We can't deal with the big things, and the unconscious does well with that stuff. And as soon as you deal with the unconscious, it's weird, isn't it? So, you know.
And weird, as you know, if you're into the medieval thing, weird is wonderful.
Yes.
And weird is the web of
Exactly.
energy that connects everything.
Yeah. It's a great word, weird,
Weird. Yeah.
because it sort of does what it says on the tin. So what plans have you got? Because you've got some things going, haven't you? A little course that you run over the year.
I'm going to have to just move us because I'm going to need to plug in.
Right.
Yeah, so while Lucy's moving, I'll tell you, we've got an online, it's not exactly online, it's little bits online, but it's it's a way of guiding and lightly facilitating and holding people in a very close exploration of nature as of the seasons as they're expressed in nature.
Yeah.
So we're on our spring module at the moment, and then that'll come to an end, and then there'll be the summer module, and then there's the late summer harvest, then the autumn, then the winter, and then spring again. Yeah, and I think we haven't scheduled these, but we will be booking in some gatherings. We're just waiting to, you know, for a little while, but we'll be having some getting together around the fire outside.
Yeah.
And going on, when we do those weekends, we call it an introduction to plant spirit medicine, but it's or a taste of plant spirit medicine. But people spend a lot of time. We're outside all the time, really, and sometimes around the fire under a cover. Lucy's got a brilliant fire pagoda that they built at her place, and then you're going off on your own and hanging out with plants, and then coming and sharing your experience with people. Like-minded people, so it's all tree huggers together, really.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
that's good. So your books that you've got, I'm going to post all this stuff up in the show notes anyway. So Touched by Nature,
Plant Spirit Medicine Journeys.
How easy is that to get?
I don't know. I think you can go online and buy it, easy peasy.
It's best to get it.
That's good. So
best to get it through the publisher. So it's Aeon, AEON.
Right. So you'll have to send me some links for this.
Okay.
So I can put.
But I think you can get it online pretty much, you know.
Yeah.
Or go in your local bookshop and order it. That's even better.
Yeah.
That's it. Now they're open.
Yeah. And that's got loads of stories. It's like we got over 50 people. We got people's experiences and we wove them together into what, you know, what we wanted to say.
Yeah, exactly. This is a good way of telling experiences, because I think often a lot of it, people have experiences, and unless they're not confirmed, they just Just think.
Yeah, exactly. We're trained to dismiss our own experience.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
That's
But
a big
Scott
part of what happens on our. Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say.
On our weekends, that's a really big part of people's experiences. Like, oh, I'm not just a separate weirdo.
Exactly.
So really do validate the non-ordinary.
Yeah, that is very, very important. Well, that was fun.
Yes, it was lovely.
That's good.
Yeah, well, nice to meet you.
Yeah,
well, yeah. So we'll hopefully might be able to connect up at some point. I don't know if you're ever down, because I'm down at Anne's Fires. I know that you did, Lucy, once, and Lynn's Fires.
I thought I might have met you.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm normally very quiet. I don't say very much.
Yeah.
Don't believe that. But.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's good. So thank you very much. And as I say, the record is quite quiet actually. So I'm hoping that it's all going to come out well, but I might have a bit of editing to do. So anyway, thank you for your time. And I'll put all that stuff in the show notes. And hopefully we'll speak to you soon.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Thank you. Thanks so much for
your
thoughtful questions.
Yeah, you're a great interviewer. Lovely.
Well, it was fun doing an interview with two people at once. So that's a first for me. Pip's got a number of books out, obviously including the one that she's done with Lucy. If you follow the links in the show notes, it will take you there. There's an interesting book that she's done about anatomy as well, which we've got a copy of, which is very useful. Particularly if you're interested in holistic medicine. So until next time, see you then.